Hello and welcome to the Storytellers Podcast, where we dive into exploring the magic and the mysteries of this human experience through spirituality, psychology, and storytelling. I'm your host, Bela Divine. I am a Mexican mystic, a trauma specialist, a longtime mentor and coach, and naturally a storyteller. And today's episode is one that I'm so excited for you to tune into. It's a conversation that I had with a dear sister named Mars, who is a folk herbalist who lives in California, but she is native to El Salvador, and she is so gifted at bringing the indigenous wisdom, especially the indigenous wisdom of plants specifically, to the modern day. And I admire the way that she honors nature and plant medicine so deeply. In our conversation, we dove into exploring her connection with plant medicine and her wisdom around working with and sitting with plant medicine. We talked about herbalism and some of the specific plants and herbs that she likes to work with, some of her personal stories, of course. And then we finished up the conversation talking about how to really use nature to inspire us to be in right relation with our technology and our phones and social media. And I was so deeply immersed in enjoying this conversation. It was profoundly informative, and I hope that you learned so much tuning in. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So today we're welcoming one of my really good friends, Mars. She is an herbalist here in California, and we originally bonded and became friends over our shared ancestry, our shared indigenous ancestry, and our passion for bringing ancestral teachings back to the modern day. Mars, I would love to know a little bit about how you first connected to your love for herbalism.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's so good to see you. And I'm so happy to see you in this space and doing this. It's such a beautiful reflection. So thank you. And to answer your question, I first came to love plants. One, I think it was always kind of in me. I grew up pretty much till I was like 10 years old, going back to my home country of El Salvador. So I would be there for 3 months, come back here to the States. I would go back. And so witnessing and being around the abuelas and, processing the maíz and making teas with yerba buena y manzanilla, I think that was always inside of me. So it was around, I was like 25 maybe, where I was at a point in my life where I felt very broken and very disconnected from my feminine. And I had no idea where to start repairing the brokenness that I was feeling. And so in the midst of like trying so many different things, it just came to me one day where I was like, why don't I just start to work with plants? I just kept hearing the echoes of my grandmother's voice when she would work with the different herbs to heal the womb. And so I was like, well, maybe that'll do something for me. And so, I did just that. And I just started working with the herbs that we had at our house. So in every Latino household, there's always Jamaica, hibiscus flower. So I started brewing my teas of Jamaica, of hibiscus. And, I somehow just intuitively did it in a way where I would say a prayer for healing, for my body and my spirit. And, over the course of like a month, I just started to notice a big shift and deep love and connection for the plants, and the way that I was appreciating all the plants that were outside in my garden, the bougainvilleas and the roses. And that's when I said, oh, there's something here. There's definitely something here. So I kind of started self-teaching and self-studying and reading all the books and spending a lot of time in nature. And that was pretty much how the long life romance of myself and the plants in the natural world started.
Were any other women in your family, I know you mentioned your abuela, passionate about herbalism, or were there any other curanderas in your lineage?
So now that, as I'm older and I'm in this space, when I see all my abuelas and my tias, I ask them all the questions. And so now I'm learning that, we definitely had some tias that were like sobadoras, which is like, a form of traditional body work. And my grandmother on my mother's side, pretty much their whole family, you know, worked the land. And so they had their granjas, their farms with all their herbs. And that's the only way that they knew how to heal themselves, because, you know, back then there was no pharmacies, there was no going to the doctors when you lived so deep into nature. So they were always, you know, working with the plants and things like that. So definitely, yeah.
So I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned that there was this time period in your 20s, and maybe it went on a little bit before then, where you were feeling disconnected from yourself before you found herbalism. Take me back to that moment. What was going on in your life, and, you know, what was the breaking point that kind of made you want to reconnect with your body through plant consciousness?
Yeah. I'm like, how far back should I go?
Whatever comes to mind is perfect.
I mean, yeah, to pretty much summarize, you know, I grew up in a pretty broken household where I never had that like example of like a powerful embodied woman in my life. Pretty much all the women in my family you know, experienced domestic violence. So, you know, that was all I would see and all I was around. So as a young girl, as a young child, I created this story, this narrative that anything that had to do with being a woman, I wanted nothing, because to me, I identified women as weak. So I adopted and spent a lot of time around the men in my family, and imitating, you know, their ways, their way of thinking, because I thought if I did that, I would be safe and I would never be in a position where I would feel weak. So that kind of played out, right, as I was a child and as I grew into adolescence and a teenager. You know, I just didn't have any type of self-respect for myself, my energy. And so then by the time I was in my early 20s, I found myself in a, you know, very abusive relationship, emotionally, physical abuse. And so, you know, I was in that for like 5 years or so. So towards the end of that, of course, I just was left with all the broken parts of myself and kind of just having to look at, you know, everything. And so at that point, I just had to kind of like self-assess what brought me to that point. You know, because I realized I was so broken. I felt so at the bottom where I was like, there's no one else here and there's no one here to blame. You know, I could try and find all the people in my life to blame, but that also didn't feel right. That just made me feel worse. So there was a part of me that was like, okay, where have I allowed this to happen? You know, so that's when I kind of started to look and track at all these things from childhood, when I was a teenager, to that present day. And so, yeah, that's really what brought me to have to do a radical, you know, make a radical decision and choice to do something so different. And for me, I will never forget, one of the most powerful things in my healing journey was, again, I had no female friends, because that's kind of just how I always did things in life, right? I always kind of kept a distance with women. I never knew how to relate. And so when I was in my journey of self-healing, I somehow stumbled upon, it's so miraculous how like great spirit works in the universe. I stumbled upon like an Instagram post of like a women's circle, and I was like, okay, that sounds beautiful. Like maybe I'll go to that. And so it was my first women's circle ever, where there was like a beautiful sound bath and like a passing of roses and like a prayer for the womb. And it was in that circle with like maybe 15 women that I had never met in my life, where I spoke for the first time ever about, you know, the abuse I was going through. And that was the most liberating, most empowering thing in my life. And really, I feel that after that moment, like so much started to shift and change.
Wow, thank you so much for your vulnerability and for sharing that. I know your story, and it's just beautiful to feel your heart. And I really just want to highlight that when we're in survival mode is a very masculine thing, because the masculine energy is concerned with survival. And when we're in survival mode, it's really hard to actually allow ourselves to slow down and to connect. And herbalism is, to me, such a feminine practice. It's such a beautiful way to connect with our ancestors as well. And you talked a little bit about how all of the women in your family have kind of experienced similar abuse. And isn't it interesting how we'll try so hard to not be like our family members and then end up really repeating their patterns?
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting that herbalism was kind of this gateway for you to heal from survival mode and to heal that masculine, to soften into the feminine, because herbs and plant medicine is inherently ancestral. I mean, it's always been the way that our ancestors have related to the earth.
Right.
And I would love to know, what could you tell me about a relationship that you've had with a plant that has totally radically changed your life or helped you to really soften into your feminine further, or supported your healing in a big way?
I'm like, which one should I talk about? Hibiscus, just because hibiscus was the first plant that I worked with. And the more and more I built a relationship with hibiscus, the more I found that, you know, physically, these plants are made up of so many different constituents that have create a physical reaction in the body. And so what I've learned about hibiscus is, right, it's like very tart, it's very astringent. So those astringent herbs help to tighten and fortify all the tissues in our body, right? And they help with the integrity of how we hold water in our cells and then release any excess. So that, when I connected it to what was actually happening on like an energetic, state in my body, I really found that hibiscus helped me to find my center and like find my strength, so I can really stand strong and tall and have the strength and the courage through this frequency of grace, of love and compassion, to see what was actually mine and to be able to lovingly let go of what was not mine. So repeatedly, I've come back to hibiscus as like that ally, that plant ally that helps me like find my center, that helps me recalibrate and like find my voice, my strength, and more importantly, like my truth. And to be able to also like share that, to flow, to allow that truth to be expressed in like a healing and balanced and harmonious way.
So I love hearing you talk about plants. You were actually the first herbalist that really caught my attention, and I took one of your courses really early on. I forget which one it was, but I was like learning how to work with milky oats and then mugwort. And I love the way that you explain the way that plants have impacted you. But I'm curious to know, how do you decide how you're going to work with a plant? Is it through research, or do you have a process with which you familiarize yourself with the energy of the plant and kind of intuitively let the plant tell you about itself? Like, how can somebody listening begin to deepen their relationship to plants?
Yeah, I love that question. So for me, whenever I'm like working with a new plant, I love this practice of like a tea meditation. So I prepare myself a tea because, one, we're using the alchemy of like water, which is very flowy. It's very connected to our emotions, and I feel it just like heightens our senses. So, and it's also so simple, like who doesn't know how to make, tea?
Yeah, and water carries information. So it's like the perfect conduit.
Exactly. And so making a tea out of the herb, and then, I create this practice where, for 15, 30 minutes, I'm just, in conversation with the plants. So, I take my cup of tea and I bring it up to my nose. I connect with the smell, with the aroma, and I start to lean in with curiosity, like, what does my body feel as I smell this? What colors do I see? What memories come to mind? So I really like create this space to allow myself and the plant to like do this beautiful dance. And then I drink it. And again, I stay in that like curious state of just noticing what comes up, right? And how it tantalizes my senses, my sense of taste, smell, hearing, sight, touch, everything. And then I journal everything down after I'm done, whatever piece of information came through. And then I sit with that, I read it, right? And then afterwards, I check like, my references, the books or whatever. And then it's so beautiful because I always find like, wow, like this plant that is, so healing for the gut. And no wonder I was seeing so much like yellow and orange, and I felt like a fire in my gut. And so I start to make these connections. And this practice, I find, one, gives a space for the plant to, like you were saying, to communicate and show me, right, the ways that it wants to heal our bodies, and also the ways that it uniquely wants to work with me. Because I think every single person has a unique energy signature, and you and your energy and the plant merge, and then that creates this beautiful and unique alchemy. So you could work with milky oats and make the same medicine that I do with milky oats, and yet we'll have a complete different, result in the end, because it's your unique energy and mine. So I really love that practice where the plants allowing them to come through and teach me. And then I find that also helps to build my intuition and trusting that, because then when I check my references or my sources, right, and I can make those connections, that we can say science is like objective, right? These objective truths, and then the subjective things that came through in my journey. And I'm like, oh, wow, like they're not separate. Right? Like spirituality and our consciousness and science is not separate at all. And so I find that that's, I don't know, just really works for me, and also builds a beautiful, deep connection and relationship to the plants. So
absolutely. As someone who works very closely with intuition, I'm very up here. So like I'm very connected to the psychic senses. What you were describing about really allowing, your intuition speaks to you through your senses. A lot of people think that it speaks to us in the mind. And so when we work with plants, we really have this opportunity to tune into our bodies. It kind of gives us a medium with which to work with. And it's this other form of consciousness. It's not just, I've done intuitive practices holding different crystals, and I'll feel different vibrations. But with plant medicine or, any kind of herbs in general, you can really sit with so many of the different elements, because the taste is tangible, the smell is tangible, the way that it makes your body feel is tangible. So it's a really beautiful way to practice softening into your feminine and connecting to your intuition. So.
And I also find that like in that type of practice and building that relationship with plants, the plants are going to work with you based on, all the information and stories and experiences that we've moved through, right? Because they're healing us on like a very personal level. So then whenever I share or I teach, I'm teaching from a very personal place of experience. So it's very, I feel like, different and more powerful than if I just reiterate information that I read online, on Google, in a book, talking about all the herbs and their actions, because it's that transmission that carries the energy of like my truth.
Of your heart, of your essence. And when people feel you, it's so much easier for them to embody. Like, it's one thing to intellectually understand. It's another thing to energetically, somatically understand. That's really what our stories allow us to do. And I love what you shared. I've never thought about it that way, but I feel this way about all of the healing work that I teach as well, which is that custom solutions are needed for each person. And so we all have different reactions. We all have different alchemical reactions to every single thing that we do. There are people who really can't sit with psychedelics or plant medicine because they might have an adverse reaction. And then there are people who like completely have their lives change and have their minds opened and heal so deeply. And so, I know that you work really closely with ceremonial plant medicine, and you've been working very closely with Yagé recently. Tell me a little bit about these journeys that you've been taking to Colombia to be in the jungle and to work with Yagé.
Yeah, so I started working with Yagé in, I believe it was 2019. So one of my teachers that I'm so grateful and blessed to have here, Taita Cesar Lezama, he was in the States, sharing medicine. And I was always the type of person that like, I really respect these plants. And so for me back then, I was like, when and if I ever work with this plant, I'll go to the jungle and work where like the plant grows, right? And then at that point in my life, there was so much going on, and the way that it all kind of just happened was very organic and easeful. So it felt very true. So I went and I sat, and within my first 3 ceremonies, I just received the same very clear message. At the time, prior to where I'm at today in life, I was, for the last 10 years in commercial insurance and, doing that whole 9 to 5. And I had really finally got into a place where like I reached all my goals, but I was not happy. And on the side, I was doing all my herbalism things, and that was kind of budding and growing. And so when I sat with Yagé, very clearly it let me know that, I had to let go of that job because that wasn't my calling. And if I stayed there, I was going to get spiritually sick. And it gave me like this whole 5-year kind of like life plan or business plan, which at the time seemed really like grandiose. And I was like, I have no idea how that's going to happen, but okay. So by the third time I received this message, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go with it and trust. So the next day I went into the office, put in my 2 weeks, and then I really just followed that like 5-year plan that Yagé gave me, which was like, work with women. For the first year, just work with women, hold circles, gather the women together, teach them about plants and herbs, and just watch all the connections that are going to start to happen and form in your life and how things are going to start to grow. And so that was 2020, the pandemic happened. So, it opened up a lot of space for me to be able to do that, beautifully. And so, yeah, after that, it was like each year it was just growing and growing. And, now when I look at in the last 3-4 years, how much change has happened in my life and growth, I feel so honored and so blessed. And so there's nothing more that I want to do and give than to be in devotional service to this plant. So with that, I've continued to deepen my studies, and my taita Cesar invited me to go into the jungle and to meet and study with his elders. And so this year I had the blessing to be able to go about 3 times. I'll be leaving again in like a week. And that's just been, wow, that has just been such a gift, the way that it has just deepened healing. And I think one of the things that I've learned the most in this year of going back to the jungle and studying is like the true art of witnessing, of just watching. I saw this meme actually this morning, and it was so beautiful because it created this like visual of like exactly how I see, what Yagé has really helped me to do, where it was kind of the silhouette of a person's like head, and inside their brain there was like all these rooms and all these little departments and different peoples and figurines. And it was like, we have to just be the watcher to watch what is happening inside of us. And I feel like a plant like Yagé holds so much information. It can hold so much consciousness. It can hold so much of the pain and the love of everyone. When I work with this plant, I'm like, how do you have the bandwidth to hold so much? And also, how are you allowing me to expand my threshold and bandwidth to feel so much? And so in that, it's given me the fortitude to, stand still, be at the center, to watch everything and observe everything that is constantly moving through my mind 24 hours a day, all the different emotions, and without judgment, just witness them. And when I can witness them, I can track their story, where they're coming from and why. And then from that place, I can be like, this is actually my truth, and this isn't. And so with that and the letting go of more things, I find that there's just more spaciousness inside of me to allow for love and true, deep peace to settle into my body, into my spirit. And that's been probably the greatest gift I've received from going back into the jungle, is just like that mental fortitude to just witness and witness deeply and witness with love and without judgment.
Tell me a little bit about how the consciousness of Yagé shows up for you. What's that relationship like?
It shows up like a jaguar.
Love it. Elaborate.
And in many of these indigenous communities, the jaguar is one of the animal spirits that's like deeply connected to the Yagé. And when we look at the jaguar and what the jaguar is in its environment, in its ecosystem, it's an apex predator, right? And so apex predators help to keep balance and harmony in their ecosystem, in their environment. And one of the most beautiful things that my teacher, Taita Cesar, always says is, donde hay agua, hay jaguar. So where there is water, there is jaguar. And where there is water, there's more than likely an abundance of life, right? It speaks to a very intact ecosystem. So I feel that that is what the spirit of Yagé also does, like in our life. It awakens that spirit of the inner jaguar to start to create harmony in our life, right? To start to clean up the environment like the jaguar does. If there's a species that is overpopulating, guess what? The jaguar is going to go and hunt that, you know, to bring back balance, right? And so that is what it helps to do, or that's what, at least personally, what I've found in my life, in my experiences, is that it's helped me to awaken that part of me, that spirit of me, to just bring more harmony into everything. And like the jaguar, track and witness.
I love it. It's so cool hearing you talk about this, because I am a facilitator of a lot of different modalities, including parts work. And parts work is all about taking different parts of ourselves, our inner protectors, our exiled parts, the parts of ourselves that we reject, the parts of ourselves that we really dislike and don't want to look at, and integrating them into wholeness. And it's this idea that only through actually meeting each of the parts with empathy and with compassion and loving them back into wholeness can we actually learn to trust ourselves and learn to feel whole. And it's so beautiful that Yagé and, you know, certain plant consciousness can essentially take us through that same process. It goes to show that wisdom that, you know, in psychotherapy and in science, we really do our best to break down into a linear process and to explain so that it's accessible to the masses, has existed far beyond, I think, our human experience. Like, it's a soul level thing, that sense of wholeness that we all desire. I would love to know a little bit. I've never sat with Yagé, and I, like you, I'm waiting until I feel called. I think I also, I'm careful. I think being with the right facilitator is really, really important. Like, there are so many people who abuse the consciousness of plants, and if I don't know if you've ever like taken or sat with some kind of, you know, plants. Like, for example, I've had an experience with mushrooms where I didn't know where they came from, and I was with a friend and we tried to do it consciously, but I feel like the fact that I didn't even know where it came from, like, I didn't have the best experience, but I didn't feel like it was me. Like, I was consciously holding the experience and I was lovingly witnessing whatever came up, but I felt like the plant was telling me that it was like upset and that it had been abused, and it made me kind of want to shy away. And at first I thought it was my body and my soul telling me that I had enough to integrate, you know, in my conscious, like, sober life without my consciousness being altered. But then I came to realize that it was actually more so like just the plant asking me to listen and to be really discerning with who and when and where it comes from. So I would love to know if you have like any guidance for finding teachers that you really trust. And then I also, a follow-up question, would love to know a little bit, for anyone who also hasn't sat with Yagé, what the somatic experience is like, and what is it more mental? Is it more somatic? Like, just a little window into what the experience is like.
Yeah, of course. And thank you. I think it is so important who you are sitting with and who is holding the space for you. You know, it is a big responsibility to hold that type of container. We're talking about really, you know, dealing with people's health and well-being. So it's not a light matter. It's not something to just, you know, do recreationally or for fun or out of curiosity. Again, these are plants of the gods. And so with so much respect, with so much reverence, and with so much love, we come to them. So for me, my best advice is really, you know, after going into the jungle and working with the elders and these indigenous communities, I really think that the best way is to work with indigenous peoples who have carried the wisdom and the traditions of this plant, the language of this plant for many generations. And, you know, it's such a gift that it is still intact. And I think also out of respect for the work that they've had to put in and the sacrifice that these indigenous people have had to put in to keep that wisdom intact, right? We're talking about years of persecution, of
colonization.
Yeah, colonization, of the division, right? All these things. And yet there are still those that are still practicing and are still carrying those traditions. So I think out of respect for that, you know, better to come and sit with indigenous people and, they know the relationship of the plants, the spirits of the plants, how to call them into the space to work with us in a good and healing way. So for me, that would be my best advice is like, try to go to the source and seek out, teachers and elders that come from that direct lineage where the plant is from.
I want to speak to that really quickly as well, because I also, my mom and I are indigenous, and sticking with the lineage, like having a lineage, the blessing of a lineage, the teachings from a lineage is so important. And you don't necessarily have to be indigenous to a specific culture to be welcomed into learning. So, if you're curious about this, like, don't feel like you need to go buy some shamanism course online. Like, you can still learn from indigenous people. I was just in Peru. I'm not Peruvian, but I work with the Turpo and the Quero lineage, and the Turpos are like my favorite because they're so powerful. And I think part of what keeps them so powerful is that they are completely disconnected from society, from technology. Like they are just out in the mountains, and the mystical nature of their teachings and their work presents itself to you in their presence. Like, even before you were to sit in ceremony with them, for me, like, I was able to feel and see and experience things within my own body and within my own reality, like a condor appearing in the sky, that kind of validated to me that these were really trustworthy people that were like really in communion with the land. So I think that's like another really great tip, is like really pay attention to how the people that you choose to work with are in relation to the land. And yes, definitely work with indigenous teachers, but go ahead.
Definitely. Thank you. And then to answer your second question, the experience more or less with the Yagé. So Yagé is similar to the more popular known plant, ayahuasca. And so the difference between ayahuasca and Yagé is, one, the lineages that work with it, and also the way that it is cooked and prepared, and the plants. So Yagé is gapi, which is the vine that also ayahuasca has, gapi the vine. And the vine is, for us, the very purgative part, right? It's the part that cleanses and goes in there and gets all those things that, are condensed in our body, those blockages, and helps to release them. And then the leaf, which is the visionary component, in Yagé is chacrupanga. In ayahuasca, it's chacruna. So again, different leaves. And that's why with ayahuasca, both in those lineages are looked as feminine plants. So they call it grandmother Aya. With Yagé, we don't refer to it as like grandfather or grandmother, because the vine for us is the masculine and the chacrupanga is the feminine. So it's just like a marriage of both. So I find that Yagé is very like harmonizing and balancing. And it can be a bit more corporal in sense of like cleansing, and there could be purging of like where we actually purge. And I think that's a very important thing today, because so many people like do not like purging at all. Like they have a huge resistance to purging.
There's a lot of withholding.
Yeah. And I think that speaks a lot to just like, culturally, right? Like we hold on to so much. And, in my study of what happens to the body when we purge is, right, all like the smooth muscles in our gut, like just super relax. And that's what creates like the openness for us to be able to like purge through our mouth or purge from, right, number two. But it's like that almost like forced, like, relaxation and opening that needs to happen that otherwise we would not do, right? So I feel like the plant and the consciousness of the plant, spiritually and also physically, right, through its constituents, helps the body to just like open completely. And then there's the beautiful visions that come through the plant. And that's where a lot of the messages and the seeds come through, that a lot of the times we cannot make sense of them in the moment as we're experiencing them, but all of those remain in our consciousness, deeply embedded. And these are seeds that over time, they start to make more sense and reveal themselves in our life as we go, and as we are also ready to receive them. So it's a deeply cleansing, healing, and awakening plant. And I find that the spirit of Yagé, what it really wants to do, again, bringing it back to like the energy of like the jaguar, is it just wants to harmonize the family system. It wants to harmonize the home, because that is our foundation. That is our earth. That is our root. So if that is not in balance, if that is not in harmony, it's going to be really difficult to create sustainability in everything else in our life. So I find that the plant really at the core You know, sure, we can have beautiful astral, you know, visions and travel into all these different dimensions. But what it wants is for us to be a good bridge to take that, embody that, and put it into practice so that we can bring harmony again into, you know, our households with our families. Because if that is good, everything around us is also good, and vice versa.
Absolutely. I always say, and ancestral work is like the deepest part of my work. I love family constellations. Totally has changed my life. And what I've learned through working with hundreds of clients and in family constellations specifically is that it's the deepest vein of who we are. We're born into this life with this karma tied to these people that are our family. And if we want to evolve, which is kind of the purpose of our experience here on Earth, we have to look at the lessons that we're here to learn. Yeah. And so I think especially for people who don't have the tools or don't know how to do the work, sitting with a power plant like Yagé could be a really beautiful way to kind of learn your unique way to healing, your unique path to healing.
Absolutely. It just makes us more conscious and aware. You know, the plant, in our experience with it, in our journey with it, it just reflects the things that are inside of us, you know, in our mundane day-to-day life. So it reflects all of that to us, so it can make us more conscious to see it, so that then we learn more about ourselves.
I have one more question for you about Yagé. What causes people to struggle the most when they go into ceremony?
Too much thinking.
Okay.
They bring too much thinking into it. Yeah, because I always say to people when they're struggling, it's like, again, the spirit of this plant gives us the permission and gives us the strength to open our container and our bandwidth to feel it all. Like, okay, so you're feeling uncomfortable in your body. If you really check in, you're also okay. You know, so why let your mind wander and be like, oh my God, something's wrong is happening, or, you know, I need to address this. If you're, you know, thinking too much and stuck in a maybe distorted way of seeing something, if you really take a moment to breathe and like kind of pull yourself back from what you're seeing, everything's also okay. Your body is okay. So I think it's just about retraining ourselves to move more slowly, to create more ampleness and spaciousness so we can see it all. And then again, it's like, why bring our stories? Why bring our fear?
The story gets you stuck.
Yeah, like why bring all those things to this beautiful plant? Like, it is so sacred. It is such a gift. Like, let's just like allow ourselves, like, surrender and let go of like our ego and our stories so that we can allow, you know, the plant to be medicine, to heal us. So that's what I see the most, is just, you know, people getting too stuck in their mind. But that's also a normal thing. Like, that's also not like a bad experience. Like, if that's what you're experiencing, that's the experience you need to have, because so many of us in this modern world are up here. We're too much in our mind, right? We have so much technology and things that, you know, overstimulate our mind. And so we're pretty much programmed. We've pretty much been bred, right, to just be thinking, analytical, very linear beings. And that is not our nature. And so many of us are very disconnected from our body. So what is happening, and the reason why so many people are sick with anxiety, depression, and all
chronic
these different
pain.
things. Exactly. Chronic inflammation is because we are wired to have our mind tell our body what to think and feel, right? So we create story.
Right.
And then we feel a little something, and then we're like, oh my God, it's this. And like, this is how I'm going to, you know, address it, or go to pharmaceuticals. And then that just like aggravates the problem.
I feel like there's this confusion where people think that they can process their emotions with their mind, when emotions are the domain of the body. Thoughts are the domain of the mind. And so people think they can think their way out of their emotions, and it just doesn't
stay
work
stuck
like that.
Yeah. And so plant medicine, I find, is a beautiful bridge to connect our mind to our body. So then that's what becomes really difficult for people, because then they're feeling a lot of things that they have not allowed themselves to feel, or have completely cut themselves off from feeling. Right. So the more that we surrender and we allow and we just like release and soften into it, the more we realize that our body has so much wisdom and so much medicine. And I really do believe that the best way to live in harmony with ourselves is to actually allow our body to be the one that's communicating to our mind, you know, because it's that's grounded, you know, that's embodied. And that's what makes us feel safe. And I think that's ultimately what we're seeking, is feeling safe.
Absolutely. Safety is like the prerequisite for all other healing. So I want to know, because I think that when people get into spirituality or healing work, or they start hearing about working with plants, they immediately think of the most intense thing. They're like, I want to evolve spiritually. I'm going to go do ayahuasca with a stranger in the jungle somewhere. And so I really want to bring awareness to this idea that there are so many other beautiful plants that we can begin working with, and that doing so might actually be more supportive. So for people who need support with grounding, because a lot of us are also up here, a lot of us in the spiritual community are, you know, like we're always trying to elevate, to find God and to connect with the divine, when in reality, sometimes we can let the divine come to us, right? And that's what you actually were the person who facilitated my first rapé experience, and that became such a potent teacher for me. And I love it whenever I'm like really stuck in the mind and I need to ground. It's something that like I love working with, and it's so beautiful. But I would love to hear about any other plants or even rapé for grounding.
Yeah, and that's why I love folk medicine and working with alternative plants, because folk medicine is people's medicine. It is community medicine. It is family medicine. It is safe for everyone, right? So for those that are not ready or don't have access or just don't feel the calling to work with these master plant teachers, right? Like ayahuasca, like the sacred mushrooms, like the Yagés. There's so many other plants with such magical and healing, you know, spirit and energy that we can work with. So for grounding, I really love to work with like root plants, right? So I like to also work with something that's called doctrine of signature, which is a way of working with plants in which we look at their physical traits and characteristics and draw the connection to the healing that they could potentially provide, right? So if we look at root plants like burdock root, you know, being one, the roots grow deep into the earth, right? So they have all the consciousness of the earth. And so when we work with them, they help us to also deepen our roots, right? They also help to heal and to fortify those different systems in the body that are also very foundational, right? Like the liver and the kidneys that do so much in our body, cleansing our blood. So a plant like burdock root is one that I often recommend for clients that feel very ungrounded, that have a lot of air energy. They're constantly, you know, in their mind, in their thoughts, and that have a hard time also bringing like practice into their life. So I find a plant like burdock root, the spirit of that plant just helps us to deepen our roots and to find our strength, so that, you know, we can do these small little things consistently daily that will build our earth element.
I love that. Thank you so much, Yagé. I also wanted to ask you about how you maintain a healthy relationship with social media and what your perspective is as somebody who is so connected to folk and ancestral medicine. I feel that social media is moving at such a quick pace. It's not supportive to our nervous systems. And I feel like so many people feel like they're under the wave of it. It impacts their self-worth. It impacts how much productivity, how much happiness they're able to experience in their lives. So I would love to know how you maintain right relation to your business, as your business is mostly online.
100%. Yeah. All right. Well, a little story time.
Let's go.
So I had this vision where I was kind of questioning technology, and, you know, there's such a boom in AI, and I was just like, what is this and where is this going? And so the vision that I received as I was asking these type of questions is, one, as humans, we've always created different forms of technology that help to create convenience in our life in some shape, form, or fashion for us. So many of the forms of technology that we've created in the past have also worked in tangent or alongside like nature and the natural cycles, right? So it's been very sustainable. And I found, I'm not an expert at this, but whenever I have read more into different civilizations at different times, that whenever there's been a like fall or demise has been because their forms of technology have worked outside of those natural rhythms of nature. So with technology today, I think that we've just forgotten that this form of technology that we've created also is its own form of consciousness. It really, really is. And so this technology, right, is still at its very early stages. It's still like a baby. A child is really what I saw it like in this vision. And so our relationship to this form of technology is like we're allowing this child to feed and teach us, which is not the way that things need to be, right? It's the parent, the adults that take care and nurture and feed and teach the child. And so we're working kind of backwards with technology. And I think that is a big part of why so many people are becoming sick and disconnected, right? Because it's like you get on your phone, you have 5,000 followers or friends. And so you're engaging with everyone, and then you put your phone down and then you're all alone, right? So you're creating and you're engaging with this false sense of reality. And so that creates this deep disconnection. And then we are seeking to find that like connection more and more. So we continue to pick up the phone or, computer or whatever it is that you're engaging with, watching television. And then we create that addiction, right? To that cycle, to seeking that feeling, that endorphin, that dopamine release. So in the vision, what I saw is, because then I'm asking like, okay, well, how am I to be in right relationship with this? Because everything that I do, which is very sacred work to me, I'm sharing it on here, right? So how am I to be in right relationship with this? How can I use it in a way that actually feels good, where I don't feel like I'm being kind of like drained or I'm tired after I'm on my phone or doing work? And what I saw is that, once upon a time, and still there are humans today that have allies such as animals that help them to hunt, right? And so the more that you take care of your hunting companion, the better the kill it'll bring home, right? That you're going to feed yourself and your whole family and community with. And so what I saw is that we are to look at our phones as an ally, right? Because our phones today, our computers today, this form of technology can bring us information instantaneously, right? And that information is what is feeding the world, right? It's just an exchange of information that we're doing. And so if we are constantly on our phones and not giving them rest, like remember, it also is a part of consciousness that is a part of this world and nature. We should work with it also in cycles and give it rest and not always be on it. So if we take care of our phones and give it some break time, what I saw, and again, this might be a little bit out there for some people, but for me, it really just like made sense and has been working ever since I've been doing it, is I find that my phone is able to actually think better, right? Like in social media specifically, because it's what I use my phone for when I, open Instagram. I have found that my algorithm, what it feeds me, are all things that actually nourish me. When I open my phone and I go on these social media apps, before it was like, oh my God, there's just so much information and so much things. And it was just chaos and seeing all these different things that are happening around the world that don't necessarily make me feel good or safe. And now when I go on there, I see beautiful things that inspire me to create more. Right? So now my ally, my phone, is bringing me good information. It's bringing me good food, right? For me to nourish myself. And when we think about the world of technology and information, again, it's not really tangible, right? So it's all working in like this invisible field through waves and how it's transferring information. So that, in the way that I practice medicine, we associate it to the air element, right? Air is invisible. We can't hold it. We can't contain it necessarily. And so the air element, when we have too much of that, creates a lot of unease in the body, a lot of anxiety, because we're not rooted, we're not grounded. We don't have our feet on something real. So my relationship now to social media is I really look at it like this sacred form of consciousness that it actually is, something that is there to serve me, to assist me. And so I respect it as such. And I do my best to not stay on it for too long all day, or like minimize my scroll time. And if I am going to look at other things, it's only going to be with the intention to inspire me. So bringing intentionality, bringing like ceremony to the way that we use our phone, right? And so when I do that, I feel better. I find that my phone operates better, and what it feeds to me, the information that it brings to me is a lot wholer, pure, more aligned with me. And also what I share on social media. That was a big thing before, was like, how much do I share? What do I share? And now it's like, I really look at it like this consciousness. It's going to live probably for a long time after I'm gone here, right? Like technology. Outlive us. Yeah, for sure. So I want to feed it seeds of good information, of wisdom, right? So now my relationship with social media and what I share on there are things that I would really love to live forever. And for me, in my very witchy way, I do look at it like technology is this field of the invisible realm, a form of the spiritual realm. And so like if you go on my social media, there's always going to be all these photos of like animals, of jaguars, of alligators, because to me, it's like, if I can put that and plant those seeds and people are going to see it, and maybe they're not going to pay too much attention to it, but that's all living in the subconscious. I'm planting seeds in their dream world, in their invisible world. And so everything happens first in the spirit realm before it happens in the physical realm. So that's my witchy way of bringing back nature, bringing back the ancient, so that at some point in time, maybe it's not now, or maybe some of you will stumble upon that information and feel inspired and get activated and have that part of you awaken. But at some point, that's going to live in the consciousness of technology so that it doesn't forget where it comes from.
I love that perspective. I have my own perspectives. Like I have 2 phones. I only have Instagram on my work phone, and I don't use Instagram from 11 a.m. or I only use it from 11 to 5 p.m. when I'm not like on calls and working. And I'm also like building a conscious relationship with social media has been such a journey. I think for me, I'm a writer and a creative, and I love telling stories. And I think that one thing that happened when trends became so popular is there was a period of time where I felt like I started to almost disregard or disrespect my own voice by trying to feed what the masses might want. And so over the last year, I feel like I've really returned to this place of recognizing that when you're consuming, you are always comparing. Therefore, comparison is like the worst thing for your creativity. Therefore, you don't want to be consuming if you're trying to actually create from a place that reflects your unique essence, which is the place from which you can bring your magic and what you're meant to share with the world. Like, you don't have to copy other people. You don't have to do what everyone else is doing. Trends really inspire that. I see people, copy my work all the time. And I think what I've realized is that no one can copy your heart, and that we all have very unique heart signatures and essences. And when we share from that place, we can actually do more good. So many people are sharing or trying to create businesses or trying to grow followings or whatever they're trying to do with not the purest intentions and with a lot of fear backing their actions. And so then, when you're scrolling through your feed and you're consuming that content, you're also receiving a piece of their fear. Yeah. But if you follow people like Mars, you don't feel that from her content. And it's because there's this intentionality. And I'm so glad I got to hear a little bit about your process with that, because I think that's so important. And personally, one thing that I do to prevent myself from receiving energetic input from people, because there are haters on the internet, is after I post something that is like sincerely from my heart, I imagine that I'm closing an energetic vault. I'm not open to receiving anyone's energy in my field, and then I put my phone away. I actually just let it sit there, and I let what I shared be enough without needing to see the likes or whatever comes through, because at the end of the day, like, your truth doesn't need to be validated. Your wisdom doesn't need to be validated, and it will reach the right people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I find that when you share from that like very genuine place, like, I don't know about you, but like, I really actually don't get that much like hate or things. I mean, of course, there's always like that one troll that like has something to say.
Yeah, like the spam account.
Yeah. But really, like, I feel that ever since I've really started to like reframe my relationship with it, it's the way that I always see it is like when we really speak and share our truth from a place that feels good to us, our truth, right, lives in our core, lives in our solar plexus that's dominated by the fire element. And so what is the fire element, right? It illuminates, it is transformative, it is also protective, because you can't get too close to the fire, otherwise you're going to get burned, right? So when I share my truth from a radical, genuine place, I feel like that fire just emanates and creates this like field of protection around me. Right? Where it just illuminates so that people who are truly seeing me can, come in and come close. And those that are wanting to project their story into it, you're going to feel the heat of the flame.
And that's a good thing. Yeah. You're going to get burned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that so much. Well, thank you so much, Mars, for this beautiful conversation, for your vulnerability, for sharing about your gifts. And, if there's any like last message that you would like to share with listeners, you can, is there anything that you would like to leave the listeners with?
I mean, first of all, thank you. Thank you again for having me. I loved our conversation, and I always love talking with you. And I really hope that, everything that we share just resonates with many of you. And I think if there's just one thing that I would like to just leave off and say, and it's also just a reminder for myself, is just, lean in with curiosity to everything in life.
Yes.
The happy moments, the painful moments, the uncomfortable moments, just lean in with curiosity and let love and compassion and grace be your guide. And I think you'll find that life gets so much sweeter when we do that.
Yes, curiosity is such a beautiful quality to maintain. It's such a childlike essence. Well, thank you so much, Mars. Please let listeners know where they can find you.
So I'm just on Instagram. That's the only social media that I use. So my Instagram is at Dose of Diosa. And everything's on there. I share all my work and my courses and my gatherings that I do through there. You can visit my website. It's also doseofdiosa.com. And that's where you'll find all the goodness.
I'll be linking all of Mars's socials and contact information below so that you can check out her courses and check out her beautiful content and work. And for anybody who is tuning in, perhaps for the first time, if you leave a review for this podcast, you can send me a message on Instagram or email hello@beladivine.com, and my team and I will send you a free thank you gift, a meditation that will really support you in your healing journey. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.